Rockets fired at Kabul airport as the US withdrawal enters its most dangerous stage. With the deadline to leave approaching, the US intercepted the attack while promising to investigate claims of civilian casualties from an earlier drone strike.
Nobody wants to see that happen. But you know what else we didn't want to see happen? We didn't want to see happen what we believe to be a very real, a very specific, and a very imminent threat to the Hamid Karzai International Airport.
The children left behind in the chaos of Thursday's blast, which killed Mohammed's dad. His mum was brought to the UK alone. Also tonight, 1 million people without power as Hurricane Ida tears through the US state of Louisiana. And Paralympics GB on target in Tokyo with 3 more golds, but Johnny Peacock just misses out.
This is ITV News with Duncan Golestani.
Good evening. As the US military prepares to end its evacuation of Kabul by tomorrow and close the chapter on 20 years in Afghanistan, the airport has come under attack from rocket fire. Up to 5 rockets were intercepted by a missile defence system as the operation enters what the White House called its most dangerous phase. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is investigating claims that 10 members of the same family, including 6 children, were killed in yesterday's drone strike on a car, which was intended to target IS suicide bombers. From Doha, our global security editor Rohit Khatri reports.
When the US government said yesterday that an attack in Kabul was highly likely, this is what they meant. Here, the smoke cleared to reveal a homemade rocket launcher where the passenger seats should have been. The Americans believe this was intended to be one of several ISIS assaults during the hours before they left, and rockets have been fired through the day. But when the US sent a drone to kill what it believed was a terrorist target, 10 members of one family were also reportedly killed. Several were children.
We're investigating this. I'm not going to get ahead of it. But if we have, verifiable information that we did in fact take innocent life here, then we'll be transparent about that too.
The final hours, the final flights, the final flares sent to combat an enemy which will still be here once the C-17s are not. Combating ISIS will become the job of the Taliban, and governments like the UK's are still working out how to deal with it, seeking assurances about safe passage for those trying to escape, but they're sceptical.
We are not being naive about this. We are basing our decisions with regard to engagement with the Taliban on their actions rather than on their words. But if the Taliban want to be treated like a government, they have to start acting like a government. And that means releasing the people who have the documents to allow them out of the country.
People like this former interpreter for the British Army who told ITV News he's one of those left behind.
We are so worried that we are left in Afghanistan for the Taliban and we will not be evacuated because the time is less and the time is going to be finished.
26 hours until the deadline for a 20-year operation to be over. But for many, the chaos and the bloodshed of withdrawal will not be over. Rohit Khatri, ITV News, Doha.
More stories are emerging of the families torn apart by the frantic rush to evacuate UK passport holders, their relatives and other refugees from Afghanistan. ITV News has spoken to the family of one mother who was separated from her family in the crowd at Kabul airport on Thursday, including her 2 young children. She made it onto a flight to the UK, only to discover that her husband and father were killed in the bomb attack. Her 1-year-old son was injured and is in hospital in Kabul. She is now desperate to find a way to bring both children to safety, as her brothers told Dan Rivers. A warning, his report does start with some upsetting pictures.
He is just clinging to life and now in need of expert medical care. Mohammed Reza's tiny body was peppered with shrapnel during last Thursday's bomb attack at Kabul airport, which killed his father and grandfather and resulted in him being separated from his mother, who is now here. Today, her brothers appealed for help to get Mohammed urgently brought to the UK.
The condition is really critical and he's injured because he got bullets in the stomach and he's not feeling well.
And doctors say he's in a coma for 5 days.
The terrorist atrocity left 170 people dead, among them little Mohammed's father, Miraj, and his grandfather, Sultan, who was a British citizen and worked as a taxi driver. In the chaotic aftermath of the blast, Mohammed's mother, Baz Bibi, was separated from her little boy and her 5-month-old baby girl, Kalsoom. She was mercifully unhurt, but hasn't been able to feed from her mother's milk since they were separated on Thursday. Their mother only learnt what had happened to her family on landing in the UK and remains too upset to talk.
It's really hard because she lost his husband and dad. The kid is really small and got a bullet on the stomach, so it's really hard. It's painful. Maybe he don't really afford the pain. So that's why we want him to be here to have good treatment and save him.
But with evacuation flights suspended, it's not clear how this little boy can be reunited with his mother unless the Taliban grant him safe passage. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
In America, the state of Louisiana is beginning to assess the damage from Hurricane Ida, which struck yesterday with 150-mile-per-hour winds. Its largest city, New Orleans, was left without power last night, 16 years to the day after it was devastated by Hurricane Katrina. President Biden has declared a major disaster in the state, but mercifully only one death has so far been recorded. Our US correspondent Emma Murphy reports.
The warnings had been dire.
Look out!
Hurricane Ida, a Category 4 storm with the power to do great harm.
Oh my God! Yo!
She certainly took her toll. Flooding across large parts of Louisiana has left those who stayed in their homes trapped in them.
Please know that we have thousands of people out right now with high water vehicles and boats who are doing search and rescue. We have dozens of helicopters up, and that's just from the state side. We know that all the local first responders are performing heroically now as well.
ITV News with Steve Scott.
Salvaged. Those who chase storms and people who simply wish to see what the toll is are now a worry for authorities.
There, almost to the eye! Barely see! We're almost there! Lockport's in the eye! Whoa!
So this is the time to continue to remain in your safe places, not a time to venture out throughout our city at all. It's unsafe.
In Baton Rouge, one person was killed by a falling tree. The winds have also left up to 1 million people without power. New Orleans was left in almost complete darkness, with warnings it could take weeks for the grid to be restored.
So this massive roof, lift off.
The lack of communication with people across the state has led to fears the death toll could rise. 16 years ago, Hurricane Katrina did dreadful harm. There had been fears of a similar catastrophe, but it seems nature has been kinder this time. Emma Murphy, ITV News in the United States.
Nicola Sturgeon says she is relieved a PCR test has given her the all-clear to leave isolation after being identified as a close contact of someone with COVID yesterday. But it was a very personal reminder for the First Minister about the impact of the spike in cases in Scotland, with record numbers of new infections over the weekend. Our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith has more.
Out of isolation and back to work. Nicola Sturgeon today made her first public appearance since being notified that a close contact has tested positive for COVID. The First Minister had to take a PCR test, which this morning came up negative.
Obviously, relieved, this is the week Parliament goes back. I've got a lot of work to do as First Minister, so I'm glad that I'm not having to spend the next 10 days self-isolating. I'm one person, obviously. Lots of people are testing positive right now, and that is of great concern and anxiety to them. Cases are higher than we want them to be right now.
Nicola Sturgeon might have tested negative, But the positive cases in Scotland have shot up since lockdown restrictions were eased and the schools went back earlier this month. Scotland's COVID numbers doubled in just the last week. The R number is now well above 1, between 1 and 1.3, which means 10 people who come into contact with the virus might infect up to 13 others. The numbers in hospital are also up by nearly 200 in the last week, though proportionally this rate is much lower than before the vaccine. Health experts advising the Scottish Government are warning things could be about to get even worse.
The modelling that's been done shows really quite an alarming picture. We could have 14,000 cases a day if this doubling time continues. The thing I think is causing concern for me and for others is that we have another big chunk of activity about to happen, which is colleges and universities, with thousands of young people also partially or unvaccinated coming back into Scotland.
These record COVID numbers are being detected while a record number of tests are being conducted in Scotland. This mobile van was offering lateral flow tests in Dundee today. Nicola Sturgeon is also scheduled to address the Scottish Parliament on Wednesday, where she will deliver a statement outlining her plans to get Scotland's numbers down. Peter Smith, ITV News, Glasgow.
Doctors have welcomed a new £6 million air technology fund in Wales designed to stop COVID spreading in schools, colleges and universities. The Welsh Government says it will pay for 30,000 CO2 sensors and 1,800 ozone disinfecting machines. The technology, which has been developed by Swansea University, is thought to reduce the risk of airborne transmission. Bank robbers armed with explosives and rifles have raided several banks in a Brazilian city, tying hostages to their cars to use them as human shields. The raids took place in Aracatuba this morning, where the robbers strapped innocent members of the public on the roofs of vehicles as they made their getaway. 2 civilians were killed, but the majority of the hostages were released unharmed. The coordinated robbery in the city to the northwest of Sao Paulo involved dozens of criminals and at least 10 cars. They reportedly used a drone to monitor the movements of police who were struggling to respond. And finally, Paralympics GB have had another impressive medal sweep in Tokyo on day 6, still securely in second place on the medal table behind China. There were 3 more golds, including an incredible 14th Paralympic title for British rider Lee Pearson in the freestyle dressage event. Sprinter Johnny Peacock, who was racing for gold at his 3rd successive games, had to make do with a joint bronze this time around. Martha Fairley has all the action.
Like many athletes here, Andrew Small was inspired by the London 2012 Paralympics, and a flying start in the men's T33 100 metres final gave him the advantage over the defending champion. Small took gold, while teammate Harry Jenkins picked up bronze in his Games debut.
Small gets it out material with his 2nd position.
Phoebe Patterson-Pine, a former swimmer, first tried para-archery while on holiday in 2012. Today she shot to the top, winning a gold for Paralympics GB in the women's individual compound open final, admitting she managed to keep her nerve but lost track of the score.
I didn't know that I needed that final 8 to score to win. So I shot it, heard that I had won, and was sort of like, oh, that's great, okay.
But it wasn't a golden day for Johnny Peacock, defending his men's T64 100 metres title. With barely anything between the top 4, after a photo finish, he was eventually placed joint 3rd.
I should have won that if I just kept my chest forward, kept driving. Dan's going to tell me off. But yeah, I just want to say thanks to everyone involved. Obviously, my girlfriend for putting up with me yet again. I said to her before this race, actually, like, I don't really care what happens here because, you know, I'm happy with her.
And over in the equestrian park, the medals kept flowing. Sir Lee Pearson's Grade 2 individual freestyle led to his 3rd gold in Tokyo, the 14th Paralympic gold of his career. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
And that is all for now. We'll be back with the latest in News at 10. Until then, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.